Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is December 21st, Tuesday, December 21st, 2021. Time for another show. No time for breakfast, I can tell you that. I've left myself zero time somehow. I think I got caught up reading an article that, I don't know, I still am in the habit of doing that and trying to, well, I start out by trying to prepare for the show, and then I read something and I say, oh, this is actually pretty interesting. I probably won't use it on the show, and yet, let's use up all the time prior to the show by reading it, and, well, I don't know. Should I tell you what it was? Did I even keep it open? I don't know. I probably didn't. Oh, yeah. All right. Well, I was opening up Pocket, I guess, or opening up a new page to get everything set, a new tab, and one of the recommended articles came up, and oh, look how fun it is. It's the one about, the Beatles documentary that I still haven't watched. From Texas Monthly, of all things. The Texan Who Saved the Beatles. And I guess he didn't save them, for very long. But at any rate, the story of Billy Preston, Houston-born pianist Billy Preston, and his performance on the Let It Be album, and how his presence, though they're sort of pointing out in here, it might have been anybody's presence, but of course it helps if there's also a presence who can actually help you with the music. But having another presence there during the fighting and the bickering among the members of the Beatles put them on better behavior. They didn't want anybody to sort of see how much they fought and were difficult with one another, and they were on their best behavior. And it helps that it was also somebody who's apparently incredibly talented to help them get their music down on whatever it was that they used to get their music down on back in those days when they recorded. Okay. Anyway, that was my big distraction. I should just go watch the documentary, and then I'd get a better feel for all this stuff. But that's what I was doing in distracting myself this morning. That has left me with my toast uneaten here. My tea is by my side. And I got another giant shipment, I may have mentioned, thanks to Scott Anderson, who keeps me in the morning beverages, although very often I brew them and then I don't get a chance to actually finish them before we get on the air. Today, another big box of tea the other day arriving, and let's see, today is the Celestial Seasonings Classic. Celestial Seasons, what do they call themselves? Yeah, the classic Morning Thunder. So in case you hear any thunder today, I guess that's this. Caffeinated one. Not all of them are. Usually I don't have one, but I'm not averse to it myself. Maybe it would be a good idea at this point. All right, the Kagro in the Morning radio show is live today. I can always turn to Bill for some content in the morning to get me back on track. Kagro X spends 2 hours explaining that no, Omicron is not a soon-to-be-revealed member of the Marvel Universe. It's just a killer virus mutation that spreads like wildfire, fanboys, so calm down. Yeah, seems to be catching on. It's the hottest club in New York, as they used to say on SNL. Right? The hottest club in New York is Omicron. It has everything, or that is to say, everyone has it. More, alarmed Twitter notices in my feed these days, and I guess that's because my Twitter feed is pretty East Coast centric and probably pretty New York centric, even though I don't live there. But anyway, that New York kind of dominates the East Coast regardless. Here's some of that tea, by the way. Ready? Not bad. All right. Well, at any rate, more, alarmed notes on Twitter about, oh my God, even though I am, as people were wont to say at the time, triple vaxxed, and I wear masks everywhere, and et cetera, and I still have it. A lot of times it enters the home through unvaccinated kids who are still too young to receive the vaccine, but not always. And so just another reminder, as we are always admonished by Greg, get that full series of shots. And I guess if you can find them, get yourself those N95s, or I use the KN95 masks. There are, of course, the Korean KF94 masks. Those are pretty good, too. though I keep reading articles to watch out for masks that you're purchasing on the internet. There are a lot of counterfeits out there. So as we come to rely on the higher filtration masks, apparently somebody thinks it would be a fun idea if they stole all our money and gave us the new Omicron variant for money, which kind of sucks. And I read an article. I pulled up an article. It was supposed to be sort of how to identify counterfeits. Although what it really was here's a picture of a bunch of counterfeits. These are counterfeits. And it doesn't tell me, like, well, how do I identify something if they change from this? I know that these are known counterfeits, but maybe there's just no way. I don't know. I was under the impression that there might be some methodology to it, but it may be the case that there just isn't. All right. Well, let's see. Other fun things to catch up on today. You know what? Here's a good idea. Give me a second to take another bite or two. If I call up something, I heard a guy yesterday. Well, let's see. I'll trace the provenance of it here through my KITM hashtag. Our good friend Truro Renfro, who sent me, among other things, this TikTok, which unbelievable. TikTok is crazy. I just don't. I can't fathom it. I mean, you see something really good on TikTok like this, and many other things, and then you go scrolling from there, and it's just like, this is, like everything else, 99% garbage. But this one's really good. Let me see. If I bring this up, and then did I pocket tag it? I may have. Yeah, I did. So, what do we have here? The TikTok account of Austin Archer, who on TikTok goes by, like they do on Twitter with an @ sign, at your pal, one word, _ Austin. And he's everybody's pal now. He does a really good job with a very nice analogy that helps, I think, I don't know how accurate it is, and epidemiologists might argue with it, but I think for the layperson, a very good analogy and explanation of just, what the hell's going on with COVID in general. It's not real. He starts out on Omicron, but it's not necessarily about Omicron. And I don't know. He goes on for about 2 minutes, and it's really good, and I can't stop watching it. And then if I play it, then maybe I'll have some more of this tea while you listen. But it's a very nice analogy, and the emotion comes through. Let me see if I can roll it here. Oh, you know what? Let me turn up the sound on the soundboard before I even begin. Let's see. We're going to want it here. Okay. I forget what the sound quality of this recording is like. But all right, let's give it a shot. Get to the original first. A lot of clicks that needs to be done here. Go, Austin. It's you now. Oh, gotta pause. All right. Here we go.
So Omicron is doing its thing, and
Perfect.
I thought I'd share with you an analogy that a friend shared with me that I really liked. COVID and its many variants are like a test for your immune system. The vaccine is like getting the answers to 40 to 60% of the test before you take it. Most of us see the benefit of having the answers to 40 to 60% of a test before we take it, but a pesky bunch of you are out there digging your heels in and saying that you want 100% A+ guarantee or nothing at all. And that's stupid.
All right, I'll pause it there just to say, okay, that's pretty good all by itself, and it is kind of stupid. But I like the analogy in terms of laying it out like, okay, well, it's not the answers to the test. It won't guarantee everything, but typically you understand you're going to want to know the answers to 40 to 60% of the test. You're going to do pretty well. It'll get you out of a few jams. You might still get a couple answers wrong. You were on your own. You were supposed to study. Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. Anyway, I thought I'd break it up mostly for the benefit of the YouTube bots that will check. I don't know whether TikTok videos are the kind of thing that you would make copyright claims on, but I suppose the Digital Millennium Copyright Act makes that entirely possible. But let's not spend any time going into this. Let's let Austin take you deeper into the analogy.
But I'm going to take this analogy a little bit further. The thing about this test is you die when you fail it. And getting a C or D is also not great. And it's being graded on a curve. So all of you people who refuse to take the answer packet are bringing the class average down and making us all take it over and over and over again. And every time we take it, it's a new version of the test that's slightly rewritten. So the answer packet that we were given to the first version might not work as well, which increases our chances of failing the test and dying. And that's why we care what you do on this test. I know there's already several of you typing in the comments, why do you care what choices I make about my personal health? My body, my choice. That's why. I just told you. I just said it in the video. So stop typing, delete that comment. I just told you the answer. So we're all just begging you, like, please take the answer packet. And you're like, I don't know where that answer packet came from. And we're like, what are you talking about? It came from the teacher, the person who knows more about this subject matter than anyone in the class. And you're like, how do I know I can trust the teacher? How do I know this teacher isn't just part of a conspiracy to try to kill me? And we're like, dude, we all took the answer packet and none of us have died. The only people that are dying en masse are the people who didn't take the answer packet. And you're like, what about Scott? Scott took the answer packet and he got a blood clot and died. And we're like, Scott is one person out of billions of people who have taken the answer packet. And we don't even know that his blood clot was related to the answer packet. What we do know is that the overwhelming majority of people who have died since the answer packet was made available are people who didn't take the answer packet. And you're like, isn't the fact that we keep having to take this test over and over again proof that the answer packet wasn't that great? And we're like, oh my God, the reason we keep having to take the test over and over again is because you refused to take the answer packet the first time we took it. And I know that people in the anti-vax community struggle with understanding analogies, so I don't know why I just did that, but please get vaccinated. So
yeah, that's basically it. Okay. All right. And, you know, it being TikTok, it restarts over again pretty quickly. So we didn't manage to cut it off exactly in time. But I thought, well put. So congratulations, Austin. You're my pal now. I appreciate it. I appreciate Churro Renfro for sharing that with me. I like that one. Oh, by the way, here, a great source for reliable masks, according to our friend Monica here, who says they also have great prices and great shipping. Oh, and they have a Twitter account, which is helpful. Let me retweet it so that it'll be with the KITM hashtag. You'll be able to find it later on. Project N95. You can't beat it for a name. That's the Twitter account. Let me just take a quick look here as I enjoy the remnants of the toast and tea here as we get started. The National Clearinghouse for Personal Protective Equipment, or PPE, N95 and child masks. Okay, great. Oh, getting a bunch of fun texts that I need to check in on here. All right, well, I can't respond to all that. That's my other life intruding on the radio here. Okay, so those of you looking, I guess, for a good source of reliable masks for good prices and with decent shipping, Project N95. They're also straight up on the web if you don't want to bother going through Twitter, projectn95.org. And it says here, first thing on the page, the trusted source. So you know it's a trusted source because it says it's a trusted source right on the page. Now, many other pages probably also say that, but in this case, Monica says that, and that's a pretty good endorsement. So I think you can say your friends in the KITM community sent you there. It's probably pretty stable and pretty good. So give it a shot. I will. I got to go see whether my usual source of N95 or KN95 masks has dried up. They've been pretty good. They're local. You know, it's not like they're making them or they're handcrafted local artisan N95 masks. They're imported from wherever the hell they're importing all this. They may very well be counterfeit as well. But these guys, since the beginning of the pandemic, have come through with supplies that nobody else could get. It was a restaurant supply place that, would ordinarily be in the business of helping restaurants, for instance, get through this pandemic. And they needed the same PPE that we did, but perhaps in different quantities. But they were the first in our area, anyway, to advertise wisely with little roadside signs that they had come up with hand sanitizer when nobody else could. So that's when I visited them, and they've been buying my KN95 masks from them the whole time ever since. And I don't know, I'm running low, and there was a time at which I said, oh, well, I probably won't need to buy another big batch of KN95 masks. And then there was Omicron, and then, well, you know what happened next. All right, but maybe I'll give Project N95 a try as well, because why not have some on their way to me via the mail while I'm still hunting around. This place that I have been buying from has been keeping irregular hours lately, and I'm wondering whether they're going back to their sort of pre-pandemic game plan. They were no longer, the exclusive source, and haven't been for many months. Now that other retail stores are stocking up on it, now everybody's got hand sanitizer coming out their ears at this point. We had the big ramp up in production to try to catch up with the shortage. By the time they did catch up with the shortage, the hand sanitizer wasn't quite so important anymore. Anyway, you all know the story there. So, okay, keeping an eye on those things and moving on to the stories I had put aside for us to discuss later on. It wasn't necessarily all going to be about this stuff. Are in Pocket and in the Twitter feed this week. Let's see what I have put aside. Yes, okay. Up at the top are the stories I put aside thanks to Darwin. Darwin, our friend Darwin Darko, has put together another recorded segment, which I would like to give some editing treatment before I roll it, so probably won't be today. We'll wait. It's sort of in the raw tape form today. And, I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, but it's COVID related, but, with the military bent, as we usually get from him, which is fantastic, because it's not coming from anywhere else. So I really appreciate it. But, I'll clean things up, make sure the sound is good, and take out all the unnecessary pauses and whatnot so that we can get through it. But again, reminder to those of you who are interested in perhaps one day or perhaps for the second time or more contributing a segment to the show. And you might worry, well, how can I sound as professionally disorganized as David? And the answer is it takes years of practice. But if you send me your tape and you're worried about, or perhaps you're not sending tape because you're worried about pauses or ums or ahs, or you can't do it all in one take. I don't think anybody does. It's fine. You can pause. You can stop to catch your breath. You can stop to gather your thoughts. And I like to give some time in the editing machine to everything that everyone sends in. And I don't think I've ever edited out content that someone has included. I'm just editing. I'm just doing so that you put your best foot forward and everything comes out sounding like you had everything really put together. So I do my best to do that for you. In case you don't know how to do that or don't have the ability to do that because you haven't bought the expensive specialized software that allows you to do it easily. I have both of those problems. I've paid the money, but I'm not that great at it. But I do my best for you. Anyway, if you're going to take the time to contribute to the show, I'll take time to make sure that it sounds as good as it can. That's what's going on. So sometimes it means the material doesn't make it to the air right away. However, other things that do. We have, let's see, another article on the January 6th committee weighing the possibility of criminal referrals. I think we hinted at that yesterday when we were reading about what's the I can't remember anymore. Am I remembering correctly the name of the one Republican who one of the two Republicans who was hinting at that in his interview yesterday? I probably archived that article, and now for some reason it's not immediately available or visible to me, but we were, I guess, you know what, it might have been one that Greg brought in yesterday. Anyway, let's get to the reading of an article because someone else has organized thoughts at this point. We might as well depend on that person to tell the story of what's going on instead. This from the New York Times Michael Schmidt and Luke Broadwater among the byliners here. I guess they're the only byliners. All right. Ooh, it's a little warm in here, too. So while I'm reading, I'm going to be removing one of the layers of warmth that usually keeps us comfortable, but today is undoing everything. I think probably having the tea on hand at the same time just makes things worse. All right. So here's what's up of late with the January 6th committee. The subheader tells us the House panel is examining whether there's enough evidence to recommend that the Justice Department pursue cases against Donald J. Trump and others. I liked this piece as I skimmed through it yesterday for its discussion of a brief taste of process. Like you might be saying, well, of course there should be criminal referrals. Why isn't that happening already? And then you perhaps paused and realized, well, we are talking about Congress here. And then on the one hand, you got the ability, I mean, no one ever uses it, but we've talked, and lots of people have shouted about it since we've talked about it, the use of inherent contempt to put someone in the House jail, which doesn't exist, but they can actually put somebody in a jail. And for the most part, apparently, the plan, even though they never use this stuff, is to put them in the D.C. City Jail, and the D.C. City Jail is sort of lending Congress that space should it become necessary. But, you know, they get used to the idea of, well, if Congress can put you in jail for contempt of court, then why can't they just handle the criminal charges themselves? But then it dawns on people pretty quickly, yeah, that's not really the design of things. Congress shouldn't be also a criminal court with perhaps the exception of that one inherent contempt issue where in the case in which it becomes impossible to hold a executive branch official to account, as opposed to allowing the criminal justice system to take care of some other contempt or someone else who you think has committed some sort of crime. So let's get to it. When the House formed a special committee this summer to investigate the January 6th Capitol assault, its stated goal was to compile the most authoritative account of what occurred and make recommendations to ensure it never happens again. You know, I don't know if you can really do that, but okay. But as investigators sifted through troves of documents, metadata, and interview transcripts, they started considering whether the inquiry could yield something potentially more consequential, evidence of criminal conduct by President Trump or others that they could send to the Justice Department urging an investigation. That move, known as sending a criminal referral, has no legal weight, as Congress has little ability to tell the Justice Department, one branch to another, right, what investigations it should undertake. But it could have a substantial political impact by increasing public pressure on Attorney General Merrick Garland, who in his first year of office has largely sidestepped questions about what prosecutors are doing to examine the conduct of Mr. Trump and his aides as they promoted baseless allegations of voter fraud. The questions of criminality go far beyond the contempt of Congress referrals that the House has sent to the Justice Department for Mr. Trump's former chief strategist Stephen Bannon, or Stephen K. Bannon as they say, or Stephen K.G.B. Bannon, or K.G. Bannon, I guess using the B as Scott puts it. So we have criminal, or rather, criminal contempt of Congress referrals for Bannon and, of course, former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows for their refusal to cooperate with the investigation, right? So those happen. Why not criminal referrals for other things? Federal law, they note here parenthetically, requires prosecutors, ostensibly, to bring contempt of Congress charges before a grand jury upon receiving such a referral. The practical fact of the matter is that they don't. It doesn't actually require that. The law does say that they're required to do it, but then sometimes they simply don't, and there's not much recourse there. Anyway, according to people briefed on their efforts, investigators for the committee are looking into whether a range of crimes were committed, including two in particular. Whether there was wire fraud by Republicans, I hadn't thought about this, wire fraud by Republicans who raised millions of dollars off assertions that the election was stolen, despite knowing that the claims were not true, and whether Mr. Trump and his allies obstructed Congress by trying to stop the certification of electoral votes. That's the one that we were talking about the other day. The judge had reached that particular conclusion. Yes, it could be criminal in itself. Now, granted, that's just a district court judge, and there are a lot of appeals between here and that becoming accepted precedent and good law, so to speak. But it's accepted precedent for now. It's on appeal, but it's accepted. We'll see how well it does. Anyway, it's not clear what, if any, new evidence the committee has that might support a criminal referral, when and how it will determine whether to pursue that option, and whether the committee could produce a case strong enough to hold up against inevitable accusations that it acted in a partisan manner. Behind the scenes, the committee's day-to-day work is being carried out by a team of 40 investigators and staff members, including former federal prosecutors. The panel has obtained more than 30,000 records and interviewed more than 300 witnesses, including about a dozen last week, whom committee members say provided, quote, key testimony. And the quote here is only for key. But there you go. In recent weeks, the committee has publicly signaled its interest in the question of criminality. Shortly after obtaining Mr. Meadows' 90,000 pages of documents, the panel's top Republican, Representative Liz Cheney of Wyoming, read from the criminal code at a televised hearing. And we saw that alongside the dramatic readings, I guess, of the texts. But yes, reminding everybody that, this is the criminal code that controls here, and you should be aware of it. She suggested that Mr. Trump, by failing to stop the violence at the Capitol on January 6th, might have violated the federal law that prohibits obstructing an official proceeding before Congress. We know hours passed with no action by the president to defend the Congress of the United States from an assault while we were trying to count electoral votes. That's true. You saw it happen. Is it illegal? Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show. It's here on Netroots Radio, so just so you know where you are. Let's pick up with the rest of this article from the New York Times about what's going on with the January 6th committee. We stopped before the break reading Liz Cheney's comment here. We know that hours passed with no action by the president to defend the Congress of the United States from an assault while we were trying to count electoral votes. Did Donald Trump, through action or inaction, or both, corruptly seek to obstruct or impede Congress's official proceeding to count electoral votes? And now that matters, now that we have a favorable ruling from at least one federal judge on that front. The question is one of the most significant to emerge in the first 6 months of the investigation. The panel has 9 House members, including 2 Republicans, and is modeling itself on the commission that investigated the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. The committee plans to produce the authoritative report about January 6th, and I know Kamala Harris will be pleased to know that they're producing the authoritative report. It plans to hold televised hearings, of course, Greg has talked a lot about those, early next year, that's coming soon, to lay out for the public how the pro-Trump, quote, stop the steal, unquote, movement helped lead to the Capitol riot. and it ultimately may propose changes to federal laws, toughening statutes to rein in a president's conduct, and overhauling the Electoral Count Act, which Mr. Trump and his allies sought to exploit in his attempt to cling to power. One of the challenges the committee faces is that so much has been reported about Mr. Trump's efforts to hold on to power and the attacks themselves. So far, the numerous disclosures about the role of Mr. Trump, his aides, and others who promoted the baseless idea, that the election had been stolen from him, have had little impact on his Republican support in Congress. But a credible criminal referral could provide the committee an opportunity to underscore the gravity of what happened while potentially subjecting Mr. Trump and others to intensified legal scrutiny. Although congressional investigators have no powers to charge a crime, that's important to remember, their ability to subpoena documents and compel witnesses to testify allows them to reveal new details about events. At times, that process leads to witnesses disclosing potential criminality about themselves or others. When that occurs, Congress can make a criminal referral to the Justice Department, often in the form of a public letter. That can increase pressure on the department to open investigations. Sometimes members of Congress, amid partisan squabbling, overstate the evidence of criminality and make referrals to the Justice Department that are ignored because they appear political. Congressional investigations also create problems for witnesses because it is against the law to make false or misleading statements to Congress. The special counsel, Robert Mueller, of course, this being the New York Times, he's identified here as Robert S. Mueller III, indicted Roger J. Stone Jr. in 2019, for instance, for lying to congressional investigators examining Russia's interference in the 2016 election and for obstructing that inquiry. But who cares, because Mr. Stone was ultimately not only convicted, yes, but then pardoned by Mr. Trump, which really should, by all rights, be lead to charges of its own, but we continue to at least tell ourselves that we regard the president's pardon power as absolute. I don't know if that's a wise course of action. I don't know if it's what the founders intended, but that's kind of where the current state of the law is. I guess until Republican justices on the Supreme Court have to consider the pardons issued by a Democratic president, whether it's this one or any other one, at which point, and if they're controversial enough among the MAGA types, there might be pressure on the Republican justices to modify or restrict the president's pardon power for the first time in history, even after arguing that it was absolute for all time prior to that. But then again, your understanding of it was just wrong until you didn't know that the five of us were going to decide the other way. Well, you did know because you talked about it on the radio, but everyone thought you were crazy, and so therefore they ignored you, and now this looks like a novel concept when we do it. But anyway, yeah, basically, it is a crime to lie to Congress when you're called as a witness, and it's supposed to land you in jail, and ordinarily it would, but for the fact that we had a crazy president who said, no, I will pardon you for the crime of lying to Congress in front of everybody because my fans don't care. I don't think that was contemplated. Mr. Stone appeared before the January 6th committee, of course, on Friday. He's back again, not just that first time for the investigation into Russia's interference in the 2016 election, at which appearance he lied and got himself convicted for lying to Congress, but pardoned. He's come back again. So he appeared before the January 6th committee on Friday to face questions about his role in the so-called Stop the Steal movement. But rather than answer questions, he repeatedly invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination because he said he feared that Democrats would again accuse him of lying under oath. And why not? After all, he did lie under oath the first time. He was convicted of it. Now, he says, I wonder what he would argue. Would he argue, no, I wasn't, because the pardon, I think, also possibly expunges the record of that crime, but we all saw it happen, right? So I don't know what we're supposed to think about whether or not he did do that thing. But he did do that thing. Anyway, at a hearing this month, Ms. Cheney suggested that the committee could subpoena Mr. Trump to answer questions, and that criminal penalties would hang over his head if he lied, which is to say he will lie and be subject to criminal penalty. Whether or not we prosecute and convict him, I don't know. And there will be the ultimate test of where he thinks the executive power ends. He, of course, no longer president of the United States, but thinks he can exercise executive privilege. So I guess it wouldn't surprise me if somebody sent him a memo and he believed it that said you can also pardon yourself for life, even after you're out of office. That would be a remarkable reading of the pardon power. And I guess most people would say, no, that's absolutely ridiculous. We only vest that power in one person at a time. That was kind of the point, and yada, yada. But what if 5 people in the right color robes, sitting in the right chairs say, no one has ever speculated that this might even be among the things that the founders meant, but, we might, or who cares? No, the founders meant something else. But gosh, the Constitution, when I need it to be, is a living document, and it's a dead document when you need it. When you need it to be living, that is. And there's really nothing you can do about it. There's no appeal from us, so we say the complete opposite. And if you're worried about the precedent we're setting for future presidents, don't worry. We will strike down that power when a president we don't like applies it. What if that was just the way they wanted to do it? We're supposed to believe that they're above that. But what if they just said, to hell with it? What if we're not above it? There's no appeal from us. Yeah, you'd be stuck with that. Now you can see why it might be a good idea to say, restrict the court's jurisdiction in some cases, or expand the Supreme Court so that you could dilute that problematic worldview, that you could just do whatever you want once you're confirmed by the Senate. Anyway, where were we with this one? Yes, right. There was the idea that they could subpoena Trump and threaten him with criminal penalties if he lied. Any communication that Mr. Trump has with this committee will be under oath, she reminded everybody. This is Liz Cheney speaking. And if he persists in lying then, he will be accountable under the laws of this great nation and subject to criminal penalties for every false word he speaks. Or possibly not. I just have to throw that in at the end. Representative Adam Schiff, Democrat of California and a member of the committee, said it was certainly possible that the panel would make criminal referrals before the investigation concluded. Most of the criminal referrals that I'm aware of, judging from experience in the Russia and Ukraine investigations, or Russian and Ukrainian investigations, were perjury-related or witness intimidation-related, he said. But it's not unprecedented for Congress to make referrals when we are aware of evidence that people engage in other criminal activity. I wouldn't exclude that possibility. One option being examined by the committee, as Ms. Cheney revealed, is whether there is evidence to make a referral of Mr. Trump or others based on an obscure obstruction charge that federal prosecutors have been using to pursue rioters at the Capitol on January 6th. The disruption of Congress's duty to certify the final stage of a presidential election. That charge, which has been used in lieu of more overtly political counts like sedition or insurrection, has been brought against more than 200 rioters. As part of their effort to weigh whether the charge would be warranted, the committee is trying to glean what it can about what Mr. Trump was saying behind closed doors about what he believed from those who were working with him in the months after election day last year, the people briefed on the inquiry said. The committee is also examining whether there's enough evidence to make a wire fraud referral over how Mr. Trump's campaign and the Republican Party raised $255.4 million from donors as he and his allies fundraised off the false claim that the election had been stolen. That one seems like perhaps a little more difficult to make a case on, but maybe not. I don't know. It might not. I don't know about wire fraud. It might not depend on whether or not people were willing participants in this fundraising and willing to believe that they were doing something to their political benefit, whether or not they believed the stories that were being told to induce them to give. We'll see. The line of inquiry has already created questions about whether people associated with the campaign have criminal exposure and created tension between witnesses and investigators. In November, the committee subpoenaed the chairman of Trump's campaign, Bill Stepien, to testify. Along with the subpoena, the committee sent Mr. Stepien a letter raising the possibility that he was aware that the campaign was raising money by making false claims about election fraud. Now, he's an interesting figure, this Bill Stepien. Was he, I recall his involvement with Chris Christie and Bridgegate, and I was wondering, was he subpoenaed to testify before the New Jersey state legislature in their investigation things? It's interesting that this campaign manager keeps getting subpoenaed everywhere he goes. That's, I guess, a bad sign, or a good reference for you if you are a Republican. Well, Democrats keep subpoenaing me, so I'm owning them, so you should be paying me more money. All right, well, let's see. Along with the subpoena, Stepien got a letter raising the possibility that he was aware that the campaign was raising money on these false pretenses. As manager of the Trump 2020 re-election campaign, you oversaw all aspects of the campaign, the letter said. You then supervised the conversion of the Trump presidential campaign into an effort focused on the Stop the Steal messaging and related fundraising. That messaging included the promotion of certain false claims related to voting machines, despite an internal campaign memo in which campaign staff determined that such claims were false. That could trip him up. The letter led Mr. Stepien to push back on the committee, claiming that it had unfairly tainted him. I think it was fair. His lawyer, Kevin Marino, said in response to questions that the committee's chairman, Representative Benny Thompson, Democrat of Mississippi, has expressly advised us that it was never the Select Committee's intent or to directly or indirectly suggest that Bill Stepien was involved in criminal activity. I don't really know that that's the case, but there you go. Mr. Marino said that Thompson has since informed us that Mr. Stepien was subpoenaed not because the committee has any evidence that he did anything wrong, but based solely on his status as the head of the campaign. The committee, Mr. Marino said, has since withdrawn its subpoena for Mr. Stepien to testify. Is that so? Okay. Well, that maybe have some interest. Although, again, it's not they're not incompatible, right? It might be the case that you were subpoenaed not because we have any evidence that you did anything wrong, but for some other reason. And then while you testified, or while someone else testified about things that ended up involving you, evidence of criminality emerged, and we referred it. It wasn't the reason we brought you in, but then you confessed, so we had to tell someone. That can happen. The committee is also looking at Sidney Powell, one of the lead lawyers, so-called lawyers, in Trump's attempts to overturn the election, who leads an organization that raked in money as she and Mr. Trump spread the lie of widespread election fraud. Her organization, Defending the Republic, raised $14.9 million between December of 2020 and July. Ms. Powell's group has more than $9.3 million in funds on hand, according to an independent audit filed with Florida, which investigated the organization and alleged multiple violations of state law. So far, Mr. Garland has avoided making substantive public statements about the issue. In a House hearing in October, he declined to answer questions about whether the Justice Department was investigating Trump and his allies for their role in the Capitol attack. The Justice Department's prosecutions stemming from its vast investigation of January 6th, an inquiry that has resulted in slightly more than 700 arrests, have so far concentrated almost exclusively on those who were on the ground at the Capitol that day, breaching barricades, breaking windows, or fighting with the police. The department appears to be building its cases from the ground up, starting with those it can accuse of definable crimes and looking for potential links to others. But it remains unclear whether prosecutors are trying to build cases against people further up the political hierarchy or connecting the attack to Mr. Trump and the aides and supporters who worked with him to overturn the results. So that's it. We anxiously await what the results are, and well, it's not usually a very fruitful game, waiting for results from congressional inquiries and committees. But what else are you going to do with your time, right? We'll wait around to see what they come up with, and boy, it could be a lot of fun. All right. We just don't know for sure. All right, let's see. Other things to get to. Let's see. There's some older things, and then there's some really interesting new stuff. But I guess what's connected here, let's go with this. Greg had sent me, I think, over the weekend, possibly for use in the Monday show, but we didn't get to it. But today's a Tuesday show, so let's get to it. This article from Lawfare, Roger Parloff's article from Lawfare, which I guess follows up on the question of whether or not there will be a lasting impact of finding by one federal judge anyway that it was criminal in itself to have acted in a manner calculated to obstruct the counting of the electoral vote by Congress. So here's Roger Parloff's Lawfare take on this. We had some sort of general newspaper of record takes on it, but let's put a legal eye on it. On Friday, December 10th, the government won a key early ruling concerning a legal issue affecting hundreds of January 6th Capitol riot prosecutions. U.S. District Judge Dabney Friedrich, remember her? I think we got it right. Yeah, her. Found that a central felony charge in a large subset of the January 6th cases, that is, corruptly obstructing an official proceeding, had been properly invoked and was not unconstitutionally vague. The provision has been lodged against about 270 of the more than 690 Capitol riot defendants accused so far in federal court, about 40% of all cases. In many prosecutions, it's the only felony charged. Jacob Chansley, for instance, the so-called QAnon shaman, pleaded guilty to a single charge of corruptly impeding an official proceeding. He is now appealing his 41-month sentence and doing it with organic food in his belly as well. You're welcome, by the way, Jacob. Prosecutors appear to have turned to the obstruction of an official proceeding law, which carries a 20-year maximum prison term, by the way, in lieu of working or invoking the more politically incendiary and rarely tested and challenging to prove charges of insurrection under 18 U.S. Code Section 2383 or seditious conspiracy under 18 U.S. Code 2384. True, although I would love to save that one for Donald Trump because of, you remember the setting on foot language, whosoever, sets on foot an insurrection. That would be special to charge him with that one and to have some arguments over whether or not his saying, let's all go down to the Capitol and fight like hell and I'll go with you, even though he didn't intend to go with him and certainly didn't in the end. It's almost as if he wanted to try to actually break that law and looked it up ahead of time, but he never does that. Anyway, where would we leave off? Oh, yes, right. We were naming the sections where you would find insurrection or seditious conspiracy in the U.S. Code. As I previously explained, and again, it's the previous explanation of Roger Parloff that we're talking about. As I previously explained, it's linked here, if the attack was an insurrection, then the argument might be made that certain past or current federal or state legislators, military veterans, or conceivably former President Trump himself, could now be excluded from holding public office under the opaque and long-dormant terms of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. That's the big prize, and that's why everyone was so interested in the fact that, that you could make a legit and usable criminal charge out of corruptly obstructing the procedures of Congress, but then can you expand that, or I guess the question of whether or not you could charge people and get a conviction on either insurrection or seditious conspiracy, then you would be able to invoke this 14th Amendment prohibition on their service in government. The seditious conspiracy law, for its part, carries unsavory historical connotations, having sometimes been used against advocates of politically unpopular causes in situations that raised First Amendment issues. If you remember your, American history courses from way back when, depending on how old you are, you likely carry a memory of that, what do they say, unsavory historical connotation of a sedition charge from the Alien and Sedition Acts, right, from way back when. But just to clarify, by the way, before I finish with this paragraph, I sort of mention it in passing the way he does because he's something of a legal scholar, and I guess presumably speaking to other legal scholars, he kind of glosses over this. But do you all know about this? I think it's been raised as an issue before, maybe not directly on the show, but certainly in the kind of reading and information gathering you'd likely have been doing. The idea that you can exclude someone from government, kick someone out of Congress, or prevent them from serving as president or at any other federal office if they were involved in seditious conspiracy or insurrection. But presumably you would have to get a conviction of such a thing in order to invoke this. But remember, as he puts it here, you could be excluded under the opaque and long dormant, referring to previous Lawfare blog writings about the 14th Amendment, but referring specifically to Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which is also linked in here. And if you haven't read it or are unfamiliar offhand with what's in it, this is why it's considered such a, holy grail, if you will, to prosecute and get a conviction under it. Remember, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment: no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress, or elector of president and vice president, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress, or as an officer of the United States, or as a member of any state legislature, or as an executive or judicial officer of any state, to support the Constitution of the United States. If you've ever taken the oath that says, I so solemnly swear to support, protect, defend, whatever, the Constitution of the United States, in your oath, then this applies. What happens? If you have also, as it says, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, that is, against the United States, or given aid and comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. Cutting through the legalese, essentially, if you've ever taken one of those oaths to uphold the Constitution, and then you get yourself presumably convicted of insurrection or rebellion against the United States, then you should be in trouble. You should be, although it's unclear what the mechanism is, it just says here, no person shall be a senator, representative, elector, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or any state, if they've done that. So it doesn't specifically say, so, if you violate 18 U.S. Code section, whatever it was, where were we? 2383, then you're out. It doesn't require that either. It doesn't say that's the mechanism. So it's, it's unclear. We'd have to probably interpret that for the first time. But, if you were to convict Paul Gosar of insurrection, then you could presumably make a motion somewhere and say, we need some sort of judicial declaration that having been convicted under 18 U.S. Code 2383, he shall not be a representative. And what does that mean? And can the court order him expelled from Congress? The only remedy or the only check against that they give to Congress, besides, of course, the difficulty of actually convicting somebody for insurrection, is that Congress can, by a 2/3 vote, override a decision by somebody, whoever makes it, that you should otherwise be expelled from Congress. So that's why they're so interested in the possibility of pursuing an insurrection charge, particularly against Donald Trump. It would mean that he couldn't take the oath as president again, I suppose, no matter what the election outcome is. Although, again, no one knows. No one's ever done this, right? So is it enough to say, well, he was convicted of insurrection, and so what? What's the outcome? States can't put him on the ballot? Maybe. Or can he be put on the ballot and you can all vote for him, but it's a waste of your vote because we're not going to give him the oath? Maybe. I don't know. I guess so. I mean, you would think that that's it, but then, the lawyers would get at it and you sit down in court and you say, well, the reality is it doesn't say exactly what we're supposed to do with this or who's supposed to enforce it against him, whether it's Gosar or Trump, right? If the states decide we're going to put him on the ballot and you say, no, it says here he shall not be president. You say, and the states could argue, I'm not making him president by putting him on the ballot. I know, but you shouldn't be holding him out as a possibility to become president. There's only a certain number of people who, it's a pretty rare thing. You hold a pretty rare commodity in your hands, a slot on the ballot for the presidential election. You're giving it to somebody for whom it's, an impossibility. Well, that might be true, but to whom do you suggest I give it instead? I don't know. Whoops, we got the...
I thought I'd share with you an analogy that...
our friend Austin rolling again because I touched the mouse on the computer where it was once queued up, so that was enough for them to decide. But you see what I'm saying? Supposing you convict Trump or anyone else, Gosar, let's say, or please, God, Marjorie Taylor Greene, of any of these things. It's unclear exactly what the application is. And once again, 5 robed justices might say, I know the common sense interpretation of this is that, but that's not the one I'm going to give it. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get that out of me. And, look elsewhere if that's what you're hoping for. And then what? Then, there's no appeal from it once again. So you're kind of stuck with it. And everybody scratches their head about it. So, well, what could this ever have meant if not this? And their answer will be, to hell with you. I don't have to tell you what it would mean. I don't know. I don't care. Here's what it does mean. It means you're not going to throw that person out of office, and that's all there is to it. I hope it doesn't come to that, but it could. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. I got to keep a couple tabs open here to try to remember to get back to these other fun stories. We'll see whether it works. Anyway, continuing with the lawfare reading, having appropriately, I think, explained it and scared you about it because, it would really be, I don't know what we would do if you get to the point where you convict somebody of insurrection and the courts, or at least just the Supreme Court say, yeah, but it doesn't say anywhere how you're supposed to do this. So the reality is, if we don't know for sure how to exclude someone from office, then we just won't. And that's that. And then what? Anyway. But presuming, under the assumption that they won't do something completely inexplicable and, embarrassing on its face because they don't want to appear overly partisan and outcome, having I still haven't come up with the term for this, but having decided on their outcome ahead of time. But let's continue with the organized thoughts here from Lawfare. Numerous defendants have protested that this statute, that is this the sedition one, or it can't be the seditious conspiracy, the insurrection one? Which statute? I don't know. Numerous defendants have protested. The obstruction, the illegal obstruction of a congressional proceeding or whatever it is, that they have protested that statute under which they're actually being charged and increasingly convicted was originally enacted, by the way, as part of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, which I wouldn't have guessed. Was that not a banking-focused law? I mean, this is an odd place to put this, but I guess there's some explanation coming here. Numerous defendants have protested that this statute, which was originally enacted as part of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, is inapplicable to the January 6th insurrection. It feels like it should be. Why would banking law bear on them? Well, Sarbanes-Oxley was passed in the wake of the collapse of Enron. That brings us back to the banking and finance realm. Sure. Whose auditor had destroyed potentially incriminating financial documents that could have been used against the company in criminal proceedings. See? Obstruction of justice. And that's why we have charges of obstruction of justice in the first place, right? If you could obstruct justice and thereby prevent a jury from coming to a conclusion that you had been involved in criminal activity, but only because you destroyed the evidence of it, you shouldn't be able to benefit from the destruction of evidence. You should at the very least have to face punishment for obstruction of justice, which, so it's an older concept than this statute. But this statute, I guess, expands that to say, the old concept of obstruction of justice to say, well, if you also obstruct Congress or a congressional investigation that might otherwise also have led to criminal referrals and conviction, then that too can carry its own penalty. Perhaps it didn't at the time and somebody got away with something. So I guess Sarbanes-Oxley, in addition to dealing with the financial meltdown crisis caused by places like Enron, and there were others, closed that loophole. If you destroy the evidence and we investigate you, up to now, I guess you've been able to get away with it. If it was the Justice Department investigating you, you'd at least still face an obstruction of justice charge. Anyway, the January 6th defendants argue that the legislative history of Sarbanes-Oxley, together with the law's structure, show that it was designed to punish obstructions only of official proceedings involving the administration of justice, that is, hearings involving witness testimony or evidence. The title of the section of the U.S. Code containing these provisions, tampering with a witness, victim, or informant, supports that view, the defendants argue. A joint session of Congress to certify the Electoral College vote was not the sort of official proceeding that Congress had in mind, they contend, right? And I guess it's kind of easy to at least understand how they come to that conclusion. You're going to prosecute us for obstruction of an official proceeding that, certainly Sarbanes-Oxley's authors were looking at official proceedings that would have something perhaps to do with, well, if not strictly limited to finance, then, ordinary criminal investigations. A joint session of Congress, at the very least, involves, as they say, no witness testimony or evidence. Like, as I was reading that, I was thinking, well, the committee's investigation obviously does include witness testimony and evidence. Yes, the investigation by the January 6th committee does. But remember, these people are charged not with disrupting the January 6th committee, but of disrupting the Electoral College count. And as they point out, right, the administration of justice. Was it the administration of justice that was happening on January 6th in the joint session? Only in the most general sense that, our, continuity of our democracy and peaceful transition of power is part of a larger concept of justice, I guess. But no, usually they're talking about criminal proceedings. So it can't be the case that this law applies. And that's not a bad argument. The defendants also argue that the statute's use of the word corruptly is unconstitutionally vague, violating the defendant's due process rights. Judges could probably give you an interpretation of corruptly, but it's a good try. At least two federal judges, Judges Randolph Moss and Amit Mehta, have expressed concerns about the way prosecutors are using the law in the Capitol riot cases, though they have not yet ruled on pending charges to Section 1512, or rather, Section 1512C2 charges in cases before them, specifically C2. Okay. In August, for instance, now I guess that's, by the way, that's lingo. I don't know what's in section 1512C2. We could look it up. Is there a link here by any chance? This isn't linked in this particular passage here, but what were we talking about? Section, so 18 U.S. Code. Well, let's look it up. 18 U.S. Code, and I copied section 1512C2. All right, well, here's section 1512. Again, in the tampering with a witness, victim, or informant section of the U.S. Code. What did we say? C2? A, scrolling down here. B, C. Whoever corruptly otherwise obstructs, influences, or impedes any official proceeding or attempts to do so. And then everybody who does that stuff shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years. So that is, it's very open and vague. By the way, what does C1 say? We're talking about convicting whoever corruptly alters, destroys, mutilates, or conceals a record, document, or other object, or attempts to do so with the intent to impair the object's integrity or availability for use in an official proceeding. That seems pretty clearly, I mean, they're making a decent argument here. That seems pretty clearly aimed at a criminal investigation of some act of obstruction of justice, shredding the documents at Enron, for instance, would be covered there. But then section C2, or otherwise obstructs, influences, or impedes any official proceeding. Like, okay, well, Your Honor, he didn't shred the documents that Enron had that would have proved its guilt, but he did bring them to court as instructed, and then, punched everybody in the face and poked their eyes out so they couldn't read okay, well, that then he's liable for the assault on people, yes. But also he ought to be charged with obstructing or influencing or impeding an official proceeding by poking out the eyes of all the jurors who now can't view the evidence against him. And also he's, in trouble for poking their eyes out, right? But, here the defendants in January 6th, they're saying, well, okay, but obviously I didn't poke anybody's eyes out. I didn't destroy any of the materials. What happened? And the prosecutors are saying, well, you impeded an official proceeding. Like, it certainly is an official proceeding to count the electoral votes, but their contention is, but it's not the kind of official proceeding that these guys meant. These guys were definitely talking about doing things to impede the proceedings of a judicial investigation or a trial or a criminal investigation by the Justice Department or some other law enforcement authority where somebody's, life, liberty, or property would be in jeopardy at some point. Not any official proceeding, like is impeding the delivery by the post office of all of the Santa Claus letters to the judge in Miracle on 34th Street. If you did something, if you tripped the postman on the way in with the intent that he would fall down and injure himself and be unable to carry those letters into evidence, is that obstructing an official proceeding? Yeah, I guess so. Okay. What about the official proceeding of just delivering the mail normally, right? There are probably other statutes that you violate, but would you charge somebody with impeding an official proceeding if it involved, the delivery of mail? And you didn't charge them for whatever reason with the other statutes that make it explicitly illegal to obstruct the delivery of mail. Or any official proceeding. Can you disrupt the wedding being presided over by a federal judge? I don't know. So they've got it's a good question here. On the other hand, I guess it's not too much of a stretch to say, I think everybody kind of views the counting of the electoral votes as an official proceeding of the federal government in ways that they might not view a private wedding that happens to be presided over by a federal judge. It's not meant to be a federal proceeding in the same way that a joint session of Congress is. So it might work, it might not. It's an interesting question, though. Not everybody is considering all of this. But I guess by way of relieving some of the frustration people might have, well, what's so complicated about it? We all saw what he did. We all saw what they did. We know this should be or feels like it's illegal. Or here's even a statute that says it's illegal. Well, is that what it says? That's, welcome to con law, everybody. That's what constitutional law is all about. So where do we leave off? We might as well read more because we're still... we still face another break coming. We got a while, but we might as well use the time in between now and then. And then, of course, I have been informed that Joan McCarter is indeed not on vacation this week. I thought that she might be. They give good, generous vacation packages, I guess, over at Daily Kos. She was on vacation last week, and this week being Christmas week, I thought it might also be the case. But she's going to make time for us regardless. Maybe she is on vacation, or maybe her whole life is a vacation. I don't know. But she's going to be here later on. So let's finish this up so that we get it out of the way before she comes in and we explore other angles on our agenda of the day. All right. So, at least two federal judges, Randolph Moss and Amit Mehta, have expressed this concern about, was this really supposed to apply to these guys? Section 1512C2. In August, for instance, Judge Moss asked prosecutors pointed questions about what limiting principle determined when they were invoking this grave felony as opposed to one of the far lighter misdemeanors that most defendants were being charged with. That is typically entering or remaining in a restricted federal building or grounds from Section 18 U.S. Code Section 1752A1 and A2, or parading, demonstrating, or picketing in the Capitol building, a violation of 40 U.S. Code Section 5104 E2G. E2G? Yes, I said E2G. You heard me. It is true, in fact, that the government sometimes seems to be choosing between whether to charge a felony or misdemeanor based largely upon how far into the Capitol building a given rioter penetrated. I don't know if that's, without foundation. Nonviolent rioters who only reached the Capitol Rotunda, for instance, have typically been charged with misdemeanors. Those who penetrated the Senate chamber, on the other hand, or into Speaker Nancy Pelosi's or Senator Jeff Merkley's offices have often been charged with felonies. Judge Friedrich's ruling does not, of course, end the dispute. Friedrich was the one who found that you could, in fact, be charged with corruptly obstructing. And I don't know whether they were specifically 1512C2 charges that we were talking about, but appears likely. Judge Friedrich's ruling does not, of course, end the dispute. At least one of these cases will be appealed, and the issue seems destined to land before the U.S. Supreme Court. Friedrich's ruling also won't be binding on her fellow district judges, who will issue their own rulings. That's just sort of the way the courts work at the moment. They can point to what she said and say yes, but they can also point to what she said and say, I disagree, and my answer is no. Not binding, but it can be helpful in cases where judges are so inclined. The specific cases before Judge Friedrich involved extremely serious allegations. Defendants Ronald Sandlin and Nathaniel DeGrave were each charged with multiple felonies for, among other things, conspiracy and assaulting 6 police officers. On December 23, 2020, Sandlin, a Tennessee man, wrote on Facebook that he was going to Washington, D.C. on January 6th in order, quote, to stop the steal and stand behind Trump when he decides to cross the Rubicon, according to the indictment. So I suppose if you credit him for knowledge of what it means to cross the Rubicon, you could say, well, okay, I think he's pretty clear about his understanding of the brazen nature of what he's about to undertake. But he might not really have any idea. Anyway, in a private conversation on Facebook, he asked DeGrave if he'd join him. Are you down for danger, bro? Sandlin asked. Well, that's very official language, along with the Rubicon thing. DeGrave said he was, writing, "I'm bringing bulletproof clothing." These are not smart guys, but okay. In the car, they brought paramilitary gear, one Glock 43 pistol, 43 caliber pistol? Okay, it's a new caliber on me. An M&P bodyguard pocket pistol, that one I've seen before. 2 magazines of ammunition, knives, a handheld taser stun gun, an expandable baton, walkie-talkies, and bear mace. Friedrich notes in her ruling, quoting the indictment, "Shortly before the Capitol attack," she continues, tracking the indictment, "the defendants recorded a live stream video in which Sandlin said that, quote, freedom is paid for with blood, and, quote, there is going to be violence, unquote." That's a bad thing to record of yourself before you engage in violence. Friedrich then recapitulates a few highlights of the indictment. Citations to the indictment are omitted here, but just know that this is the source of this stuff. Just after 2 p.m., we'll see how you would decide this as a judge. Just after 2 p.m., the defendants forcibly stormed past exterior barricades and law enforcement officers and ignored building alarms to breach the Capitol. They pushed several Capitol police officers guarding an exterior door to the Capitol rotunda, thus allowing the mob outside to breach the building. Sandlin attempted to rip the helmet off of one of the officers. They made their way to the Senate gallery, where they wrestled officers in order to get inside. Sandlin struck one of the officers in the back of the head. In the Senate chamber, DeGrave shouted at the rioters to, quote, "Take laptops, paperwork, take everything." Given these shocking allegations, the case certainly presented the controversies surrounding the obstructing an official proceeding charge in a context that was maximally favorable for the government. Indeed, Friedrich's ruling may still leave some wiggle room for defendants whose alleged conduct was not as violent or planned as that of Sandlin's or DeGrave's. For while Friedrich found that the accusations against Sandlin and DeGrave came within the core conduct, the quote-unquote core conduct that the law was designed to prevent, she acknowledged that there may be other scenarios at the edges that present vagueness problems. That said, Friedrich's succinct 26-page ruling does provide the government with a strong win and a well-reasoned precedent to show other judges. It employs a textualist, plain-meaning analysis that appears well-crafted to appeal to conservative jurists, including the majority of the Supreme Court is currently composed, unless they just decide they don't want to do it, right? Friedrich was appointed to the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia by President Trump, by the way, and previously served as an associate counsel to President George W. Bush. So I guess that what would count as impeccable Republican credentials, except that Republican credentials are so impeccable. Anyway, as for the statutory question, Judge Friedrich had little problem finding that Section 1512c2 applied to the facts at hand. While it was true that Sarbanes-Oxley was spurred by very different events, statutes often reach beyond the principal evil that animated them, she wrote. She found no textual basis for interpreting the phrase official proceeding to reach only hearings involving the taking of testimony or evidence. On the contrary, the law explicitly defines official proceeding to include a proceeding before Congress, which is at 18 U.S. Code 1515A1B, in case you were wondering. And in case you were wondering whether that makes any difference where it was, remember, we're talking about Section 1512. So at 1515, not far away, presumably, they define official proceeding as including a proceeding before Congress. So I think that helps. While its other terms, she wrote, are expansive and seemingly encompass all sorts of actions that affect or interfere with the official proceedings, the fact that the Section 1512's title in the U.S. Code was somewhat inapt merely reflected that 1512c had been inserted into an existing provision. Its earlier title had simply never been adjusted to reflect the new subsection's focus. Okay, That can happen too. Although she agreed with the defendants that the proceeding in question must be akin to a formal hearing, the constitutionally and statutorily mandated joint session before Congress to certify the Electoral College votes met that hurdle. There's a presiding officer, she wrote, a process by which objections can be heard, debated, and ruled upon, and a decision, the certification of the results, that must be reached before the session can be adjourned. The due process challenge, asserting that the term corruptly was unconstitutionally vague, was also unavailing, she found, at least for the defendants Sandlin and DeGrave. The chief hurdle here was a 1991 ruling of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit stemming from the Iran-Contra affair. See how much stuff gets brought into this? This is how you get to a 26-page ruling on whether or not two nuts that punched cops and jumped into the Senate gallery and stole laptops did anything wrong here. Like for everybody else, we're like, sure they did something wrong. Well, point exactly to the statute you're talking about. So we get into it. All right, so the chief hurdle with the corruptly phrasing being unconstitutionally vague comes from a 1991 ruling of the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit in the Iran-Contra affair. There, a split panel had overturned two convictions of former National Security Advisor John Poindexter, you remember him, under a different statute, 18 U.S. Code 1505, for having, quote, corruptly obstructed Congress by lying to it. But Judge Friedrich found that subsequent courts had cabined Poindexter's holding to its facts and had not read it as a broad indictment of the use of the word corruptly in the various obstruction of justice statutes. Congress has since amended that particular statute, by the way, in an attempt to overrule the Poindexter finding. So that's important too. The touchstone of a vagueness, that's what it says, Friedrich wrote, citing well-established precedents, is whether the statute made it reasonably clear at the relevant time that the defendant's conduct was criminal, as though they were reading it. Reviewing other courts' interpretations of the meaning of corruptly, she found that the word had generally been construed to mean wrongfully or intentionally or using means that were independently criminal or inherently malign. Accepting these definitions, the case before was a fairly easy one. The indictment in this case alleges obstructive acts that fall on the obviously unlawful side of the line. She wrote, defendants engaged in advanced planning, forcibly breached the Capitol building, assaulted Capitol police officers, and encouraged others to steal laptops and paperwork from the Senate chamber. It's true that this ruling does leave open at least the theoretical possibility that another case, without sufficient allegations of intentional and wrongful obstruction, might fall on the other side of the line. On the other hand, it's hard to imagine that prosecutors would have charged a Capitol riot defendant with this felony without being able to meet that hurdle. This means that this well-reasoned, textualist ruling from a Trump-appointed judge looks like a very big win for the government. Yeah. And it looks like it'll stand, too. Well, at least for the time being. So thanks, Greg, for forwarding that one to us for our attention. And good day for us to get that one discussed and out of the way so that we can have a more general discussion about those things later in the week when you return. Let's see. Anything else that we can or should, anyway, squeeze in prior to our third break and entering into our last section where we'll hear from Joan McCarter? Well, let's see. I've got one extremely long read that I'll save for another day. Other things. Oh, you know what I didn't mention? Here, this is a short item we can include in this in our COVID roundup. I would ordinarily perhaps save it for that with Greg tomorrow. But at any rate, I thought this was pretty remarkable. We read the other day that the CEO of Southwest Airlines, among others, I guess there were two CEOs of airlines, had been called in to testify before Congress, the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, holding a hearing on airline oversight in which Southwest Airlines CEO Gary Kelly told a U.S. Senate panel on last Wednesday, that the air in passenger jet cabins is so clean. How clean is it? It's so clean that masks worn inside, quote, don't add much additional protection against the spread of COVID-19 on planes. The statistics, he says, I recall, is that 99.97% of airborne pathogens are captured by the HEPA filters, the high efficiency particulate air filtering system. So, and it's turned over the air every 2 to 3 minutes on an airplane. So that was his claim. And the real surprising part, like 2 days later, he was COVID positive. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter is with us. All the holiday shopping is done, so much time on your hands that you decided to, get ready writing the roundup on Joe Manchin, filibuster reform, various aspects of that, and come and share that with us here on the air, I guess. At least the news that you're writing about it, if you don't want to necessarily spill the beans of what you're writing.
I'm halfway in. It'll be coming up soon.
But yeah,
part of it you saw already yesterday.
Well, yeah.
Provided you were reading Daily Kos and reading me yesterday.
Well, sure. Of course. What else would I have been doing? Okay. All right. Well, I was sure there were other things going on, too. But, yeah, all right. So anyway, more will be coming about that because it's coming back into focus. And... yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I saw yesterday. Now this reminds me of seeing. Was it David Axelrod tweeting, saying something odd, just in terms of I don't understand why he or how did he put it? Oh, I'd love to see. They should just take all of these very popular provisions that are in Build Back Better and pass them individually and make all the senators who say they oppose some of these things stand up and explain why they oppose universal pre-K child care and all the child tax credits, et cetera, which, it's a nice sentiment. I thought we were supposed to get something more sophisticated out of David Axelrod. But then, I kind of when were you going to do that?
Put Manchin finally on the spot, make him actually stand on the floor.
It would be nice.
And vote yay or nay on some of this stuff. Of course, he can't be forced to make a statement on the floor. They can't force him to say, you have to explain to us why you're opposing this.
Yeah.
But at least he would have to vote. So I can kind of see that sentiment, even though, it's an exercise in time wasting.
Yeah. I mean,
as long as the filibuster exists.
That was the heart of it. And I just I wondered, had you thought that through at all, David? Because I don't know when you would find the time to do things like that. There's hundreds of provisions in there, but even if you only chose your top 5, it's going to take you a full week to get to the first one of the 5 just on the vote, where, the whole upshot of this will be, Manchin will stroll onto the floor in the middle of classical music playing in C-SPAN, point vaguely downward, and then leave. That's the big moment that we've built towards for the whole week. Unless he wants to come up and defend it and claims time to speak on it, but why would he? So,
yeah,
right.
And to a certain extent, that's Schumer's sentiment too. presumably, if you can read the Dear Colleague letter he sent yesterday that way, and I do.
Okay.
I mean, there was thinly veiled fed-uppedness with Manchin, I think, in that letter.
Yes.
Where he says, we are going to vote on these things in the new year, probably in the first week of the new year. And he said, so that every member of this body has the opportunity to make their position known on the Senate floor, not just on television.
Yeah, all right.
It's a little bit pointed.
Yeah, right. I mean, the opportunity will be there whether or not Manchin takes it. We don't know. What's he like as a floor speaker? I don't know that I've watched a great deal of his discussion. Maybe he just doesn't do it very often. It doesn't strike me as an orator.
He's not a regular on the Senate floor, no.
Okay. But it would be interesting to hear him make his case. But again, all he really has to do is, if he says he's going to vote no, he'll do it. There's no words involved. They just point. So,
but, forcing the vote.
You'll get a picture of it.
It has utility.
Sure. I mean, there were no words in Kirsten Sinema's curtsy thumbs down, but it became a thing.
Yep.
So, there'll be a picture of Manchin giving the thumbs down, or sometimes they just wag their index finger downward a little bit. Everybody has their own style. You could curtsy. That would be something he could consider doing. I don't know if he'd be willing
bring
to
a
do
cake.
That. Yeah, right. There's all sorts of ways to do it. But yeah, I found that
She also brought a cake along with her curtsy.
Oh, was that the same day, the cake? Okay.
Yeah, the cake was the same day.
Well, I still wonder about that thing. I mean, she must wonder about it too. What did I do that for exactly? Why did I make that gesture? The thumbs down, it's like you could pick I don't know. Maybe that's why people prefer the index finger down. You don't get that universally understood thumbs down thing. You just, But she chose to do it. She's new.
Well, and that was after she patted Mitch McConnell on the back. Yeah. So there was a whole thing going on that morning for Sinema.
She should have put that cake in his back and then voted that way, and then it would have been a wash. So just pie him in the face and then vote no. All right. Well, there's more discussion too, as people are saying, well, we're going to, or Schumer drops his hints, we're going to vote on these things, and people. I don't know. I think people have been
it's more than dropping a hint. He said we're going to do it. In the first week of the year, we're going to vote on Build Back Better, and you're going to have to tell us where you are, and we're going to vote on voting rights. And you're going to have to tell us where we are and potentially figure out how we're breaking the filibuster.
That's the issue. That's where it sort of went into hint territory of, well, then people say, well, I understand. People who know said, I understand you're going to hold the vote, but how are you going to win the vote? Yeah.
And is this going to be the time? I mean, this would be the fifth vote on voting rights. And it hasn't been broken yet. And has there been one or two of them on the bill that Manchin actually helped shape?
Okay. Yeah, it's been a couple.
Is this going to finally be it? Have we finally reached a breaking point? I don't know. It looks like Schumer's going to try.
Okay. Well, there'll be a vote, and it's yet to be determined whether this is the one where they say, all right, this is it, we're forcing it through, or this is meant to be the last straw one, where we say, boy, I'm really frustrated. Now there's been a big buildup of other senators making a point of making public statements saying, I think we really should have at least a carve out for voting rights. So is that what this means, that this is the one?
Before the whole Build Back Better Manchin going on TV because he's mad that Biden put out a statement that had his name on it.
That's unusual.
This is apparently what caused the hissy fit. Anyway, before all that happened, Manchin had been supposedly deeply involved in discussions about what they could do to move voting rights forward, what they could do with the filibuster to change that. I don't know where it stands now. Because
somebody
of
said his
Manchin's
name.
petulance.
Oh my God! Yeah, and a lot of people have dismissed that as just a convenient excuse, but if it's that easy to come up with convenient excuses, then who knows what could trigger his walking away from a deal on voting rights or involving how we vote on voting rights or whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's a little difficult to predict where someone like that will land if mentioning your name, which is ordinarily considered to be a good thing, but, I guess he was called out, I suppose, for...
He says he was called out. He was not called out. It's a very innocuous statement. Oh. A reflection of the fact that, yes, they have had to do a lot of catering to Joe Manchin, which is not true. A secret.
Yeah.
Everybody's pretty much aware of that because it's been reported on ad nauseum for months.
And again, also something he usually likes to have people know. Everybody's catering to me. I'm the power broker in all this. That's all they're saying. And it's been
his staff says that they explicitly told White House staff not to include Manchin's name, that they didn't want him singled out. That they could have said Manchin and Sinema, Manchin and Democratic leaders, Manchin and whomever, but the fact that, which, Biden did include Schumer and Pelosi in the statement as well.
Okay, then.
Is it an excuse? This supposedly was the huge personal affront that Manchin just, it was a bridge too far. It was endangering his family. It was going to send protesters to his yacht.
Well, that already happened, so we know.
The endangering his family business. I mean, I don't know if you saw the story explaining all of this from Steve Clements, the opinion piece in The Hill.
No.
I lost a lot of respect for Steve Clements in that.
That's too bad.
He's apparently a Manchin whisperer. He knows Manchin, talks to him regularly.
Okay.
He actually said he thought that Manchin's fears for his family were well-founded if Biden sent out this statement with his name in it.
Well, based on no evidence, but okay, you said it. So, yeah, that's not very likely. I mean, we are in we're dealing with a time where there's a lot of such threats, but there's just been, that's both sidesism, and when there doesn't appear to be any evidence for believing that people are going to level threats against.
There are the people in kayaks around Manchin's yacht with catchy slogans and holding up signs.
Yeah, and his family's not on that boat.
Versus, the people armed with guns, with flagpoles, with whatever they could lay their hands on storming the Capitol. There's kind of a difference there.
Yeah, I don't know. That's pretty weird. Out of an abundance of caution, I suppose you could think that any protest could erupt into anything, but that's not a very sensible assessment of what's going on. And in a week of very pointed, I was going to say Democratic, but really White House statements, that sounds like one of the more mild things that's come out in a week of things that have been very tough. And you should recognize the difference in tone, I think, between when he mentioned your name and the things he's done to beat up on foot draggers on vaccine uptake, for instance.
Yeah.
So, all right. Convenient excuse for him. I guess it's better than saying, "Oh, I'm corrupt," or "I'm dumb." So, not going to hear much of the confessions in the way of that sort of thing. But okay, it would be interesting. And there have been moments during which Manchin has, I guess, said things that aren't as flatly negative on finding ways around the filibuster when he's discussing it in the terms of voting rights. But he still never said he would support outright a carve-out. But where he's been vague and evasive, as opposed to his usual outright rejection, has been about voting rights. So, maybe.
Because, it's not money to people who will go spend it on drugs instead of their kids.
Yes. Oh, right. That was very 80s of him, I thought.
It It was very 80s of him. Yes.
I was thinking,
it's been a long time since a Democrat has said something like that.
Yeah.
Of course, he didn't say it publicly. He said it in private.
Yes.
To fellow Democratic senators. It's been confirmed by both Huffington Post and NBC News that, yes, this is the kind of thing he says in private. That continuing the expanded child tax credit will mean people will spend the money on drugs instead of on their kids, and paid family leave, people would just use it as an excuse to go hunting. They would say they are sick and they would go out and hunt.
I was surprised to hear that he's anti-hunting now, but that's the ad that should be run, I think. But yeah, that's I would assume he wanted people to go hunting, to exercise their Second Amendment rights. I don't know why this war on the Second Amendment here, Joe Manchin, but okay. I guess you could try and do that. And of course, the money spent in drugs just seems so outdated. I was thinking maybe the people in the kayak should bring the boom boxes out and play 80s tunes really loud outside of his boat. I'm sure it would disturb his neighbors, but those neighbors should be disturbed as it is. Quite honestly, I'm very disturbed that Joe Manchin is my neighbor.
Yes, it would be a problem for me.
Yeah. So
no, it wouldn't. I mean, I couldn't ever afford to
live
where he lives.
that could be, but yeah, if you manage to do it, I suppose, if you're one of the neighbors and you say this is outrageous and people are disturbing me and they shouldn't be doing that, I guess I would say, it's a boat. Move.
Right.
Take your house elsewhere. So go sail away and live in the Caribbean, or the next marina over. For all I don't know what the situation is down there, but anyway. So yeah, or I suppose we could deliver leg warmers and scrunchies to his office as a possibility as well.
I want to deliver bags of coal. I want to just dump several truckloads full of coal on his yacht for his Christmas present.
That's very symbolic. I was a little worried that he would sell it on the spot market and profit, though. But because it's his business. But it's dirty, so there's that. And I don't know how you're going to get the truck onto the boat. But I see the idea. Catapult, though, could we? Is that okay? It's probably against the law. All right. But I like the idea, certainly, of delivering him something. And if we could maybe put it in a giant stocking of some kind, lower it from a helicopter. I don't know.
There you go.
We'll work on the logistics of it. But
okay.
It'll all be written up at Daily Kos. Everybody go look. I promise you that it'll be
or on Twitter. I don't know if I'll go into my coal fantasies on Daily Kos.
It's probably not a good idea. If somebody else does something crazy with the coal, they'll come looking for you. So, okay. Well, let's see. What other fun things might be happening between now? I mean, it's kind of a quiet period. Everybody's attempting to leave town. There were a lot of judges confirmed.
I think everybody has left. I was really tempted to do, and we've been very tempted to do, a big call to get everybody back in the Senate this week following Manchin's thing, to do the vote this week. But then Senators Warren and Booker said, no, we've got COVID. We have breakthrough cases. So
that's not good. Because there was a lot of absences.
More showing up, I think. There were 2 more on the House side this week.
More
or just
COVID
today,
cases?
rather, announcing that they've got it. So
yeah, this is really getting everybody. The Omicron, it doesn't care. So I guess it
doesn't care, and it's spreading like, a plague.
Yeah. You're careful. Don't even say wildfire up there in the West. I didn't say it. I'm here in the East. We don't know anything about that. But yeah, there was a lot of absences. A lot of people took off. I guess at the end of last week, I saw a lot of people were tweeting at me like, "Well, they're confirming all these judges." They went through a marathon judge confirmation run, and everybody was getting confirmed with 40-something votes. 40 to 20, because there were only 60-something senators on hand.
Right, a whole mess of Republicans left town just because they didn't. Just because they're Republicans,
Yeah, and they were safeguarded in that. I guess they left behind numbers that people were starting to say, well, could we bring up something unexpected and get away with it? Could we try pulling a nuclear option now? But sure, you could. I don't know whether it would really work. I don't know who's there. I don't know what they could do to delay things until they got people back, or what agreements they had made, perhaps not to do these things, or it was just one of those "it's not done" sort of things. But it got people excited.
McConnell was not going to leave the hen house unguarded.
I think there were instructions as to what to do, and they left the proper number of people behind to make sure that nothing would go haywire. But at least they got to clear a bunch of judges, and that was a clear capitulation that the Republicans said, we're not going to stick around and fight over these judges. Go ahead and clear them.
Yeah,
So
but just these judges.
Yeah.
There were a lot of them there. Of course, the Senate doesn't have proxy voting like the House has.
Mm-hmm.
So there were a lot of them there spending long hours on the floor. No Republicans are ever masked. So I expect that there are going to be some more infections showing up this week.
Probably true. Just before you came on, I was going over the fact that those airline CEOs who came to testify that there was no reason to wear a mask on a plane anymore because the air is so clean, and then one of them came down with COVID, or you know, and I guess had it when he was there. So people were circulating the video of his testimony. He's coughing during his testimony, which isn't great. Could be anything.
Unmasked,
right?
Yeah.
Unmasked, and then so coughing and into his hand at that, and then probably shaking everybody's hands afterwards. But that turned out to be problematic as well, and I'm not certain. I wonder what the effects of Omicron will be on airline travel, and whether or not their HEPA filters can deal with it. But someone else did point out there's an awful lot of time that you spend on a plane in which those HEPA filters aren't on. If you're idling at the gate, for instance, the air is not being cleaned.
I'm not really anxious to get on an airplane personally.
Yeah, I couldn't blame you. And at that point, especially while you're idling, there's no point in not having the mask on since you're not eating or drinking or anything. So, or at least there's been no meal service. But the irony of him coming to testify that the air is so clean, there's no reason to have a mask.
Safe.
And then
while infected.
And then he infects probably the whole committee as well. We'll see. I'll have to keep an eye on who's on that committee and whether they make any announcements. But also, by the way, did not stop leading congressional dummy Ronnie Jackson from tweeting about this. By the time he tweeted about it, it was already known that the guy was COVID positive, but he insisted on tweeting around that two airline CEOs testified to Congress that masks aren't needed on planes. Why are we still requiring them? It's because Democrats want to keep you afraid. Totally anti-science. And the guy was already sick by that point. But Ronnie Jackson didn't check. So
Doctor.
Dr. Ronnie Jackson. I mean, by the way, his specialty is stepping on rakes, apparently. Like, duh. The one example he picks up is the guy's already announced he's positive for COVID, but God forbid you should read a newspaper before you open your mouth, Ronnie. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of weird. And now we'll see whether the rest of the committee, I think it was Commerce Committee holding that, are Booker and or Warren on that committee. I should check. I wonder. But they could easily have gotten it on the floor, as you were pointing out, all the unmasked Republicans spending all those hours confirming all those judges. It was worth getting the judges, and now it turns out not so great about getting COVID, though.
Not so great about getting COVID.
Well.
Both of them say they are sick, but mildly so.
Well, we expect that
Let's
they're
see.
fully vaxxed.
Commerce, it's Cantwell, Schatz, Baldwin, Sinema, Hickenlooper, Klobuchar, Markey, Duckworth, Rosen, Warnock.
Okay. Well, watch out,
Blumenthal, guys. Peters, Tester, Lujan. So no, not those.
All right. Well, what am I saying? It was a hearing. So we know that there was maybe one of them at a time in the room, probably.
Right. Social distancing. Now they have an excuse.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Not attending hearings.
Right. You only show up when the TV cameras are on you. No, I was just social distancing. And thank God, too, because that guy had COVID. You have a point. Well, we'll keep an eye on the Republicans who might have wandered into the room as well and would also likely have been unmasked. And I don't know how. It seems to me like the senators are better at vaxing, the Republican senators, than the House members.
Than the House members, yeah.
I think that's the case. So I'm not going to get, lucky that, like with a breakthrough on Ted Cruz. Probably. But, well, Omicron could do it. That's true. It could get anybody. Unless there's no Omicron in Cancun, in which case I guess he'd be safe. But no plans to go for him, and although I'm sure he thinks it's safe to get on an airplane. We know that to be the case. All right, let's see. Anything else happening? I guess our next meeting will be in. Will we have made it into the new year yet? No, we'll be in the last couple days of. I don't know. What's the calendar say? You know how calendars work?
Today is the 21st.
Okay.
7 days from now will be. I will be a year older.
Oh, well. Oh, okay. Well, that's important. Okay. Well, happy birthday comes up sometime in between now and then. When? Should we all?
The 27th.
27th. Okay. Do you have coal? Would you like some? I know where we could get some. If we make a bulk purchase, we can send you some. Will you accept 80s tunes?
I would accept 80s tunes, yes.
So you and Joe Manchin will get the same gift, but we'll mean it well for you and ill for him. I don't know, but we'll try and find. Okay, we'll all wish you a happy birthday. Everybody do so on Twitter and Facebook and everywhere else.
Not on Facebook. I'm not there anymore.
Oh, okay. Well, good. You probably shouldn't be. I don't go there except for that. Once a year, everybody, there's a page there that I left behind at some point, and everybody goes and says happy birthday to the Facebook page, and Facebook
I was at
emails
that stage, and I would go in and I would look periodically and I'd see what family was doing, but most of my family that's on Facebook is crazy, so I didn't really want to see what they were doing.
Okay, sure. So, better that you not look, I guess.
I felt like such a hypocrite. Being on Twitter and being on the site, complaining about Facebook constantly and telling people to boycott Facebook when I had a Facebook account. So I decided it was time to delete it.
Okay. Yeah, I understood that it was somehow, is it difficult at all to just delete it? Or do they make it tough?
It's to a certain extent. I mean, you're supposed to download all of your stuff before you do it, and the download never worked.
Oh, yeah, that may be.
I don't know whether that's a feature or a bug.
Right.
But it got to the point I figured, somewhere I've got all of the pictures that I put up there, so
okay.
I hadn't used it enough to make it worth saving. They don't make it easy.
Yeah, that's what
you do sort of have to Google how do I get rid of Facebook and go with unaffiliated sites explaining how you go through the process because Facebook kind of hides it.
Yeah, right. They want to be able to hold on to all of that content and make it look like no one's leaving. And yeah, all right. Well, I've certainly abandoned the generalized use of it. So we'll see if I can figure out my own way. I don't use it for anything. I might as well. No loss, no skin off my nose getting rid of Facebook at this point. All right. Well, let's see. I don't know. We're coming up on the end of our segment here anyway, but it's been kind of a slow period in Congress with everybody sort of skipping town. The only show going on is trying to figure out a way to get BBB done and then processing a bunch of judges while everybody's trying to figure it out. So that's what's happening.
And the important thing, the immediate thing with BBB and the thing that Manchin has the biggest problem with, the child tax credit. Because the last check, the last monthly check has now gone out.
Right. And so, that won't show up again. And, has he? How open has he been about this? I keep seeing conflicting stories, and of course he's insisting, no, I don't oppose that, but yes, I really do. I don't know. I really don't know where he actually
privately
stands.
He really does. Publicly, the only thing he's done publicly is sworn at reporters for trying to get answers from him on policy questions regarding it, how much of a monthly payment would you agree to, and.
Something less than
Arthur Delaney of Huffington Post asked him that several weeks ago and got sworn at for it. For the simple question,
what do you support?
What number's okay with you? He refused to answer. So he appears to have a serious problem with the child tax credit, which is an existing program. It's just now available to more people. It's not like this is not money that's already been going out to people.
Yeah.
So
they've gotten used to it at this point, and they'll be depending on it. And he's taken it away, and the only word we have is something he denies, but that others confirm that he thinks you'll just use it for drugs, which is amazing. And I don't know what to say about it other than, get with the times. It's not said anymore, and it's not happening. On top of which, it just makes it that much more ridiculous. And why no one ever believes that anyone else would use these things? Why don't we not believe that farmers use farm subsidies for it, or that people who get tax cuts for the rich, and capital gains tax cuts doesn't go to drugs? I bet it goes to drugs more often than child tax credits do.
I would expect so. Yeah. And maybe those farm subsidies are growing pot.
Exactly. Right. And by the way, I mean, if you're looking for places where spare cash might be going to drugs, I would say look for people with yachts and Maseratis to start with, but then, golly, that's just you. All right, well, happy birthday, Joan, coming up. Thanks for coming by.
From networksradio.com.
Talk to you next week.
All right, great. We'll look forward to it. One more before the year is out.
Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
All right, time now for us to turn things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. You know what he's got on tap for you. Let's see what specifics he has for me. The Pentagon issued rules aimed at stopping the rise of extremism among the ranks. That's an order, everyone. Stop the extremism. I'm not certain what the rules are, but maybe Justice has an idea. Stay tuned.